The sound of the latch was sharp and final, a cold metallic snap cutting through the warm air of the bustling street fair. 8-year-old Lucy, heart splintered by sudden, incomprehensible fear, could only watch in tearful horror as 2 stern-faced deputies secured the heavy kennel door of the patrol truck, locking away the one creature who represented pure, unconditional safety. Copper, her retired K9 companion. He was gone, seized as an aggressive stray, his confused eyes silently pleading for release. That quick, misguided click of the lock was not just procedure, it was the traumatic breach of a sacred family bond, executed in the very shadow of the sheriff's justice. How quickly we forget that true courage lies in the pause before action, and how devastating the cost can be when professional honor is sacrificed for perceived urgency. If this reflection on duty and heart resonates with the values you hold dear, tell us where you're listening from. Drop your city or country below. We want to know where the light of justice shines brightest. The dust was thick over the main thoroughfare, hanging in the late morning sun as the annual Pioneers' Day street fair swelled to a chaotic, joyful peak. You could hear the carnival barkers and the scent of fried dough mixing with the exhaust of old pickup trucks, the perfect blend of small-town life, until the siren cut through the noise like a cold knife through butter. That's the moment the air changed, hardening from festive chaos to the sudden, serious focus that only the arrival of law enforcement can bring when trouble comes knocking. 2 county patrol cars, lights flashing, but sirens now silenced out of respect for the crowd, pulled up hard near the ice cream parlor, where a disturbance had apparently flared. The deputies didn't hesitate. They were professionals trained to move toward the noise, to stabilize the scene before panic could truly take hold. In that rush, sight lines narrow, and the world shrinks down to the perceived threat, overriding the small details that always hold the full truth. It was in this swirling vortex of focused urgency that they spotted him, a large, dark shepherd mix, moving slowly near the edge of the crowd, wearing no official gear, just a simple, worn leather collar. The report was for an aggressive, loose dog, and Copper, the county's recently retired K9, known for his quiet strength and honor, fit the physical description just enough to seal his fate in that frantic second of poor observation. Before the bystanders could offer a clear warning, 2 young deputies, fresh out of the academy and fueled by the adrenaline of their first major public call, swiftly approached Copper. They misinterpreted his loyal stillness for aggressive posturing and began to deploy restraints. If stories like this, stories of duty, devotion, and sometimes devastating error, resonate with the honest core within you, take a moment and subscribe to this channel. We believe in sharing the quiet truths of the human condition right here, in this community. The resulting sound ripped the festive atmosphere apart, the high-pitched raw scream of a young child. "He's mine! Please don't take him!" 8-year-old Lucy, small and overwhelmed by the surrounding adults, materialized instantly at Copper's side, tugging hopelessly at the deputy's cuff, her eyes wide with a fear that instantly betrayed the magnitude of the mistake being made. These deputies, however, were locked into their mission, heads full of the training manual's warnings about aggressive animals in crowded areas. They saw a situation that needed controlling, not a family pet, especially since the dog carried the gravitas of a working animal, even without his vest. The chaos of the street fair created a sound barrier, muffling Lucy's desperate explanations until they were nothing more than distracting, infantile noise to men focused purely on maintaining public security and administering justice to the reported threat. Copper, the silent guardian, reacted not with aggression, but with confusion and deep-seated obedience, a testament to years spent learning the chain of command. He understood the language of restraint, even if the hands applying the pressure were unfamiliar. His loyalty was tied to the badge, regardless of who wore it. But his worried gaze kept sweeping back to Lucy, a visible fissure in his professional composure, showing the powerful bond of family. Every fiber of Lucy's being cried out in protest, fueled by the immediate and primal need to protect the one creature that offered her the most profound sense of courage. She tried to explain about the faded scars on Copper's snout, the specific way his ear folded, details that would have instantly confirmed his identity to anyone who took a breath to look. But in the rapid unfolding of events there was no breath taken, only reaction. It's often said that panic is the enemy of observation. And here, under the beating sun, we saw that terrible truth play out. Two decent men executing their duty with precision, yet fundamentally misapplying the spirit of the law. They were upholding public safety, yes, but at the cost of immediate, quiet justice for the most vulnerable member of this unfolding drama. They secured the heavy-duty lead, ignoring the protests of the girl, convinced they were removing a danger, not seizing a protector. They started walking Copper toward the heavy grille of the patrol truck, their faces stern and uncompromising, while Lucy trailed behind, tears streaming. Down her face the realization dawning that her appeals were useless. She screamed now for her father, the one authority figure she knew could override any command. But the sheriff was nowhere to be seen, tied up on a priority medical emergency call at the far end of the fairgrounds, oblivious that the storm of misunderstanding had just slammed into the most sacred part of his own life, his family. The question that echoes down these quiet, small-town roads is simple. In a moment of pure adrenaline and perceived danger, how much of your common sense and how much of your heart are you willing to surrender to the blinding rush of duty? To understand the agonizing confusion witnessed moments ago, you must appreciate the quiet history forged between the dog and the girl, a bond deeper than blood, built on shared years of service and sacrifice. Copper wasn't merely a household pet retired to the backyard. He was a walking monument to professional honor, having spent nearly a decade as the county's sharpest, most trusted tracking K9, responsible for locating dozens of missing persons and bringing definitive justice to cases long gone cold. His work ethic was legendary, measured, not in praise or commendations, but in the silent nods of weary deputies who knew their lives often depended on the reliability of his nose. But those years of hard service, the rough terrain, the midnight chases, the occasional necessary defense, had taken their toll on his body. He moved slower now, the arthritis stiffening his gait, and the faded scars around his muzzle told stories of silent battles fought in the defense of the innocent. That morning the sheriff, a man whose principles were rooted deeply in the soil of his community, made the call to allow Lucy to bring Copper to the fair. He understood that sometimes the greatest comfort, and indeed the only justice that matters, is found not in a written statute, but in the faithful presence of a beloved animal. Copper wasn't attending in an official capacity, but as a comfort companion, a living reminder of resilience for his daughter. The relationship between Lucy and Copper transcended the standard owner-pet dynamic. It was the quiet partnership of a guardian and his ward. He was her anchor in a world that often moved too fast, giving her a gentle, unbreakable sense of courage just by being reliably present at her side. Where the sheriff had to be the immovable face of the law, Copper was the soft, unwavering shadow of protection for his family. Every deputy who had worked with the sheriff knew Copper by reputation, but working K9s are fundamentally defined by their gear. They are recognized by the tactical harness, the official patch, the visible tools of their trade. Stripped of that uniform, wearing only a generic, faded leather collar that spoke of domesticity rather than duty, Copper was physically just another large shepherd dog to the untrained or unfamiliar eye. This fateful lack of recognition centered entirely on the newest members of the team, the young men who were only now learning the subtle geography of the department. They knew the protocol for strays, but they hadn't yet been introduced to the deep, complex history of the sheriff's K9 lineage, the lineage that formed the very bedrock of their departmental honor. Imagine the subtle cruelty of the setting. A weekend street fair is a sea of distraction, where every input is sensory overload. It takes tremendous discipline to differentiate between the ordinary and the truly threatening. The young deputies, trained to prioritize action over analysis in a rapidly degrading situation, saw only a large, potentially aggressive dog, overlooking the silent plea for justice held in the gentle sadness of Copper's eyes. For Lucy, Copper was the embodiment of home, the constant presence that demanded very little but gave everything, asking only for a spot by her feet. This quiet understanding, this profound trust within the context of family, is what the deputies inadvertently trampled when they focused solely on the technical aspects of the report, failing to see the sacred line between duty and domestic sanctuary. The sheriff had often spoken to his team about the need for compassionate courage, the kind that requires pausing for 3 seconds to observe the whole picture, not just the part that screams for action. He knew that the quickest route to upholding the law isn't always the right one, especially when the emotional well-being of the innocent is at stake. The irony, sharp and painful, was that the dog they restrained was not a stray menace, but the greatest living symbol of loyalty and honor the county possessed. His current quiet duty, protecting the sheriff's daughter, was perhaps the most profound mission of his life, a testament to his ingrained dedication to family. The simple bureaucratic mistake, the failure of a verbal handover, the lack of a familiar face on the patrol team, set the stage for a traumatic collision between the cold efficiency of law enforcement and the fierce, unyielding love of a little girl. A moment of confusion, fueled by adrenaline, was about to become a powerful, heartbreaking lesson in what truly defines justice and service. So, the stage is set. The symbol of professional honor is mistaken for a threat, and the daughter of the law is left powerless to defend the one creature that gives her courage. But where was the sheriff in all of this, and how close was he to seeing the painful error unfold? The noise of the street fair, that vibrant, overwhelming cocktail of human activity, now became Lucy's greatest enemy. She was screaming, not with the petulance of a child denied, but with the full raw panic of a small person watching the symbol of her safety being unjustly removed. Her words were a torrent of desperate explanations. "He's retired. He belongs to Dad. He's copper." But the sheer volume of the crowd swallowed them, rendering her pleas into background chatter the deputies were expertly trained to filter out. The young officers, determined to maintain their grip and focus on the primary task of securing the reported threat, had already erected an invisible wall of authority. Their body language, tense and professionally rigid, communicated a clear message. The scene was secured, the threat neutralized, and no amount of civilian protest would change the course of action initiated in the name of justice. They led Copper away, the large dog trotting submissively beside them. He was a creature of absolute discipline. Years of K-9 training had ingrained the necessary honor to follow a command, even when that command made no logical sense. He offered no resistance, no snarls, no struggles, just the quiet, heavy weight of his confusion. This very compliance, heartbreakingly, confirmed the deputies' false assumption that they were dealing with a stray that had been easily managed. Copper's only act of defiance was the constant, worried flick of his head, his eyes fixed backward on Lucy. In that look there was a profound, silent communication, a canine understanding that the bond of family was being breached, and an apology that he was unable to use the courage of his working days to resist these badges, these uniforms, he was biologically programmed to respect. Lucy chased after them, her small legs pumping fiercely, the tears blurring the carnival colors into streaks of pain. She realized quickly that she couldn't outrun the long strides of the deputies, nor could she outshout the competing noises of the fair, the loudspeaker announcements, the music, the 100 conversations happening all at once. The silent realization of her own powerlessness washed over her like an icy wave. She needed her father, the one man whose voice carried the true weight of justice in this county. She screamed his name now, a desperate, tremulous sound ripped from the depths of a child's fear, knowing instinctively that only the authority of the sheriff could right this terrible, bureaucratic wrong. But the sheriff was a long way off, down near the old bank building, preoccupied with assisting medical personnel who were struggling with a heat-related emergency, a scene demanding immediate, focused attention. His attention and his honor were rightly tied up where life was most immediately threatened. The irony was devastating. The law was protecting life in one corner, while inadvertently dismantling the emotional safety of his own family in another. Every step the deputies took toward the black and white patrol truck deepened the moral chasm of the mistake. They were operating on a sliver of bad information and the urgency of the moment, forgetting the core lesson that upholding the law requires more than just following procedure. It requires the courage to pause, and truly verify before acting. As the deputies reached the patrol vehicle and prepared to open the reinforced back door, the space reserved for transporting evidence and secured animals, Copper cast one final, lingering look back at Lucy. That expression of worried resignation was more agonizing than any struggle he might have put up, an undeniable violation of the sacred relationship they shared. Lucy stopped running. She stood there, small and isolated in the surging crowd, watching as the deputies maneuvered Copper into the secure compartment. The click of the door latch echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence of her own mind. She had failed to protect her friend, and the crushing weight of that injustice settled upon her shoulders. This moment, where the heart of a little girl was broken by the cold machinery of her father's profession, was the terrible inflection point. She stood alone, weeping, not knowing that the very sound of the latch was about to travel across the fairgrounds and trigger the one man who understood the true meaning of honor and family. What happens when the weight of authority clashes with the truth of the heart? The sheriff, a man whose soul was etched with the weight of silent decisions and hard-won justice, was finally stepping away from the medical call, his attention still focused on securing the scene and ensuring the medics had clear access. He was mentally reviewing the details, the kind of professional diligence required to maintain order in a crisis, when a sound, low and strained, sliced through his concentration, a sound only a father and handler could instantly recognize. It was Copper's bark, but it was wrong. It wasn't the clear, assertive command bark of a working K9, nor was it the relaxed, familiar hello bark of home. It was anxious, pressurized and confined. The sound of a dog who was deeply uncomfortable and fighting years of professional conditioning. The hair stood up on the back of the sheriff's neck. A primal alarm bell clanged deep in his chest, instantly overshadowing the medical emergency he had just left. He turned his head sharply, following the sound across the densely packed fairground. That's when he saw her. Lucy, his daughter, standing utterly alone amidst the vibrant crush of people, her small body convulsing with silent sobs. And next to her, at the rear of one of his own black and white patrol units, two of his deputies were securing the rear kennel compartment door. If this scene, this terrible clash between duty and family, strikes a deep chord with you, if you believe that true justice is found when we defend the vulnerable, take a moment and comment, "Justice," right here below. We need that affirmation in these times. The sight of his daughters, despair coupled with the anxious whimper of his retired K9 partner, caused the sheriff to freeze for a single, devastating heartbeat. In that split second of perfect recognition, the world outside the fairground dissolved, replaced by a crystalline image of injustice being perpetrated by his own men. The shock was palpable, a cold flood of betrayal and mounting fury. He didn't walk. He launched into a dead sprint, the heavy leather of his duty belt slapping against his hip with every stride. This wasn't the measured gait of the county sheriff approaching a situation. This was a father consumed by the fierce courage required to protect his blood and the creature who embodies the department's honor. As he closed the distance, his voice, usually calm and deliberate, erupted like summer thunder, loud enough to cut through the din of the fair, but meticulously controlled. He didn't scream accusations, but demanded immediate clarity, drawing on the weight of his rank and the fury of his heart. "Deputy, hold that position," he commanded, his authority radiating like heat from a forge. He arrived at the rear of the patrol unit, chest heaving, his face a mask of controlled devastation, his eyes fixed, first on Lucy, and then on the two young men who flinched visibly under the sudden massive presence of their superior. He didn't need to ask who the restrained dog was. He knew. He could see Copper's profile through the grill, the worried eyes, the familiar faded collar. The sheriff lowered his voice slightly, the sound heavy with disappointment, demanding, "Explain, and explain fast. Why is my daughter's retired K9 partner restrained in a unit, and why is my daughter sobbing?" He never used the word "my," preferring the institutional "the," but this was family territory now. The deputies, realizing instantly the gravity of their mistake and the identity of the dog they had just seized, paled considerably. They stammered, attempting to reference the stray dog report, the confusion, the chaos, but their explanations were hollow echoes, against the raw moral clarity of the situation standing before them. The sheriff didn't move, but the stillness of his posture held more terrifying authority than any shout. He watched his men struggle with the immediate consequence of their lack of thoroughness, understanding that true justice required both immediate remedy and a lesson that would settle deep into their professional conscience. He looked at Lucy, whose face was stained with tears and fear, her small hand reaching helplessly toward the patrol truck. He knew that the honor of his badge was only as strong as the safety and trust he instilled in the people of this town, especially his own. He was seconds away from restoring that justice. The realization struck the deputies with the force of a physical blow. Their faces, seconds ago marked by professional resolve, now showed immediate, profound understanding of the monumental error. The sheriff's quiet, controlled authority left no room for doubt or defense. Without waiting for a formal command, one deputy fumbled for the release latch and sprang Copper from the back of the unit, the metal door swinging open with a jarring clank. Copper burst out, not with aggression, but with the focused, desperate velocity of a dog returning to his singular, most important priority: Lucy. He barreled straight toward the little girl, who instantly dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around his thick neck in an embrace that spoke volumes of relief and enduring family bond. The tension which had coiled tight around the heart of the fairground began to unwind instantly. The deputies watched the reunion, shaken by how close they had come to crossing an unforgivable line, not just seizing a pet, but traumatizing the daughter of their commander and betraying the long-standing honor of a departmental veteran. They offered swift, heartfelt apologies to Lucy, their voices thick with shame and professional regret, understanding that true justice sometimes means owning up to a mistake made in the blinding speed of assumed duty. The sheriff knelt beside them, the ground surprisingly dusty and real beneath his knees, ignoring the staring crowd. He didn't focus on his men right then. His priority was the emotional restoration of his daughter. He pulled Lucy and Copper into the circle of his own steady courage, his hand resting firmly on Copper's heavy shoulder, silently reassuring them both that the brief storm was over. Once the immediate emotional trauma was addressed, the sheriff stood, turning his attention to his team. He kept his voice low, ensuring the crowd heard only a firm, private conversation, not a public reprimand. He reminded them that while efficiency is necessary, it must never supersede the foundational honor of their calling, which demands careful observation before aggressive action. "In chaos," the sheriff said, his eyes steady and unwavering, "assumptions become enemies. You saw a situation and reacted with protocol, but you missed the human element and the history. You missed the simple fact that true justice requires you to look beyond the vest, beyond the collar, and see the heart of what you are protecting. Copper has earned his retirement. His service and courage demand your respect, even when he's just wearing a faded leather collar." The young men nodded, the lesson sinking in, weighty and vital. It was a reminder that in the rush to secure a perimeter, they must never lose sight of the sacred trust they hold with the community, and especially with the children who depend on their discerning justice. As the sheriff finished speaking, Lucy stayed exactly where she was, her arms still locked around Copper's neck, burrowing her face into his fur. Copper, sensing the final passing of the threat, settled his large body down, resting his chin heavily on Lucy's leg. He was retired, moving slower, but that quiet, protective act, the silent weight of his presence, proved he was still the guarding angel of the sheriff's family, eternally ready to provide courage. The true strength of any law officer isn't measured by the speed of their draw, but by the stillness of their heart when faced with overwhelming facts. How will these young men carry the weight of this day, and will this profound moment change the way they define justice when the stakes are highest? We see how quickly the wheels of duty can spin off the rails when attention replaces observation. This moment, played out under the bright, unforgiving sun of a small-town fair, offers us a quiet, lasting truth about the nature of true authority. It reminds us that the badges we wear, whether literal or metaphorical, carry the immense responsibility of sight, the duty to see the whole truth, not just the convenient half. Ask yourself, In your own moments of high-stakes pressure, where do you place your trust? Do you rely on the immediate reactionary protocol, or do you seek the deeper honor that demands you pause and verify the facts that pertain to family and innocence? The sheriff's reaction, driven by the thunderous weight of a father's courage, was not merely about rank. It was about the moral conviction that the law must serve and protect even from its own mistakes. Copper, silent and steady, reminded everyone that loyalty and justice are not conditional upon a uniform or a title. They are qualities of the heart. What price is truly paid when we let chaos dictate our conscience? And how often, in our own lives, do we mistake a tired, silent guardian for a simple, aggressive threat? The greatest measure of our honor is found in how quickly and completely we are willing to admit error, restore trust, and return the protection to those who deserve it. If this story reminds you that the pursuit of justice requires a steady hand and an open heart, and if you believe in the stories that remind us of our better nature, please take a moment to subscribe. Walk this moral road with us.